Welcome to AFSPA Talks, a production of the American Foreign Service Protective Association. Each month, we deliver informative health and wellness topics you want to know about, so make sure to subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. And if you have any questions about content discussed in this episode, ask them at AFSPA Live, our live Q&A session streaming every last Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on youtube.com/AFSPA Cares. Now here's your host, Chief Executive Officer Kyle Longton.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of AFSPA Talks. I'm Kyle Longton, and with me as always is...
Maddie Norton.
Maddie, it's still April,
It is.
and we are continuing our theme of all about AFSPA. And before we get into that, I wonder if you can just give us an overview of other things that are happening this month.
Yeah, I can. This episode is coming out April 27th. And so I had to make sure that that is April 27th, and it is. So that'll be 3 days before AFSPA Live, which is all going to be about all things AFSPA. So if you have more questions following this recording, definitely send them over to our Microsoft Form page or just attend AFSPA Live, and you can ask them there. And we'll be there to answer all of your questions. It's at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, but if you can't make it live, submit your question, we'll get to it. And you can always watch later at any time during your day. And all of our AFSPA Lives are on our YouTube channel at AFSPA Care and all of our podcasts. So if you're wanting to see us, not just audio, you can also watch us. That's where all of our podcasts live. It's the end of the month of April, so we do have some things coming up in May. We have a financial self-care for women webinar that is on Tuesday, May 12th, and it's offered at 3 separate times, 8 a.m., 1 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So definitely go and register for that if you're interested. And otherwise, we hope to see you at AFSPA Live.
Absolutely. I look forward to that. And, we're going to focus at AFSPA Live answer all your questions about AFSPA, generally all of our programs, but of course our biggest program that we offer is Foreign Service Benefit Plans. So we are anticipating a lot of questions about that. Our last episode was focused on some of the most frequently asked questions for FSBP. And we had our colleague Igor join us for that. And a lot of the episodes that Maddie and I do, we bring guests in to talk about the wealth of programs that we offer through AFSPA, but particularly through FSBP to support ongoing health and well-being for our members. That said, we also understand people still depend on us to pay for their medical care, whether it's preventive, diagnostic, or treatment. So today, we're going to be a bit more technical and look at claims. And so today, AFSPA talks FSBP claims. Now, you're thinking, sure, this is the bread and butter of what you all do. Absolutely. But because our membership is unique and worldwide, our approach to processing claims matches the needs of our unique and worldwide membership. So to talk us through how claims processing works, we have a true expert. Kelly Rath, who is the senior manager at the Claims Center of Excellence, the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program at Aetna. And Maddie, we have a lengthy bio on her. I'm going to suggest we read it all just because she's done so much for the plan over the years, and I want our listeners to understand that.
Right. Yes, she has lots of experience, and we are lucky to have her on the podcast today. So go ahead with her bio. She has more than 40 years of experience in the insurance industry, including 34 years dedicated to the federal employees' health benefits plans. Kelly Rath serves as a senior manager overseeing all first-pass claims processing functions. In this role, she reports directly to lead director Mark Haygood and manages a team of 122 employees, including 8 direct reports, which are 7 supervisors and 1 claims reporting specialist. Throughout her tenure, Kelly has successfully led multiple operational areas within the FEHB plans, including customer service, claim rework, and project support, complaints and appeals, overpayment and recovery, training, and other plan sponsor support functions. She also manages the development and maintenance of operation policies and supporting documentation essential for the plan's AAAHC accreditation. Kelly is known for fostering strong cross-functional partnerships across operations and collaborating effectively with the FEHBP client, patient management, utilization management, network management, enrollment, compliance, finance, SIU, vendor relations, and other key stakeholders. Her leadership ensures alignment with business goals and the successful execution of initiatives for the FFSFEHB organization. She's a native of Omaha, Nebraska, and began her career processing claims and working in customer service, including a client support role with the Mutual of Omaha Companies. She relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1992 to begin supervising a service operations team supporting the FEHB plans, eventually earning promotion to senior manager. Over the years, she partnered closely with project teams and played a critical role in guiding teams through several system transitions resulting from major company acquisitions from Mutual of Omaha to Coventry Healthcare and later from Coventry to Aetna. And she currently works remotely and resides in Oak Island, North Carolina. And we are so excited to talk with her today.
We absolutely are. So let's get to it. Kelly, welcome to AFSPA Talks, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Kyle and Maddie. I really appreciate you inviting me today to your podcast. I'm really excited about this.
We're excited to have you here with us to answer all of the burning questions about claims. But we'll start with a little bit about your background. We covered a little bit of it in your intro or in our intro. But I wonder if you might tell us a bit about your history working in insurance and with the Foreign Service Benefit Plan in particular.
Yeah. And I just want to say first, I feel really blessed. I've had a career of almost 40 years working in the federal plan space and specifically with the Foreign Service Benefit Plan members. We really have an amazing team and a bunch of leaders that support everything we do every single day. So I'm really proud of the team. But early in my career, I started as a claims processor. I looked for any opportunity to learn other roles in the organization. I moved to customer service. I answered phone calls for members, providers. I started handling adjustments or rework of claims and then appeals, which are more complex types of work. But there was a pivotal point. I was thinking about this, looking back at my career, but in my fourth year with the company, I was given an opportunity for a person who was out on medical leave to work with one of the federal clients. It was an account manager role. It was exciting for me at the time, but it really led me to where I'm at today in my leadership role. I earned my ALHC designation, which stands for Associate in Life and Health Claims, early in my career as a claims processor. But the company was really good at the time, offering training courses and things like that. The courses taught me basic knowledge of life and health insurance and the operations of life and health insurance. But looking back, it really helped prepare me for all my expanded roles over almost 40 years.
And that's fantastic. I know how challenging those courses have been. I've not taken a few, did not get the designation like you did, but it's also a lot to keep up with. And I know you've kept up with it through the years as well. And you've been with us through a lot of growth and seen a lot of changes.
Mhm.
In healthcare overall, but also for our members and our membership. And we're excited to continue to grow, but we're also excited to learn more about sort of the intricacies of what you and your team do for our Foreign Service Benefit Plan members every day. So I'm going to start what I think is the easiest. You're going to correct me if I'm wrong. Type of claim, and that is a stateside claim submitted by a provider. So I think this describes the majority of claims that the plan receives. But what do they look like when they receive the plan?
Yeah, correct. I would say it probably is the easier if we're not having to enter it, right? So really, generally, these are claims submitted by providers, and they're submitted in a standard format for electronic health submissions. Okay, so the standard format has a lot of fields on the form, but it's really just ensures consistent data is transmitted between the provider and payers like us. So we all have a consistent data format submission. This includes the presence of ICD-10 diagnosis codes, which are standardized alphanumeric codes used by providers, to document the disease or the reason for the visit, and then CPT codes, which are generally 5-digit numeric codes that describe the procedure or service being conducted during the patient visit, like a medical office visit, a surgery, it could be inpatient services, it could be laboratory, radiology. But these are essential fields and things that providers put on the claim, the electronic claim, so that we can determine reimbursement of the claim. But a high percentage of our claims are received electronically. You said it right. As an example, last year, 67% of our claims were submitted electronically. That's a lot. And of that member, most of them do auto adjudicate by the system and do not require a touch by the processor. But then that other 33% of claims for foreign service benefit plan members have to be manually keyed by the processor because they're considered non-standard.
Gotcha. All right,
Yep.
we just threw a lot of
I
acronyms
know.
and things at people, but you explained them great. And before we continue, I want to pause. And you said the word auto adjudicate. So
Mhm,
there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence right now, especially in
mhm,
healthcare. So could you
mhm.
explain what auto adjudication is, and is AI involved?
Okay. And hopefully I can answer the question. And if I don't, you let me know. But auto adjudication, it has been around for many, many years. So this is not anything new, but it's really just an automated process where insurer payers like us use software that can instantly review the claim submission, approve it, or deny it without any human intervention. So, of course, there's a lot of programming involved with that. There's preset rules in the background, including, every year we have to make sure the plan benefits
Mhm.
are put into the system correctly, right? The reason auto adjudication is so important is that it speeds up processing. It's more efficient and it helps with administrative costs for the plan. But Maddie, you also mentioned AI, and there are instances where AI can assist us with adjudication. And the one example I can think of is on the provider's electronic claim submission, if the member has other insurance coverage, they all know to put other insurance coverage in a standardized field on that claim submission. In the past, our system would stop it and it would require the processor to always touch those claims. But now with AI, for example, it's programmed to run through a list of insurers that are always secondary to our plan. So we could pay the claim as primary, like Medicaid, TRICARE, and then AI will help the system allow the claim to auto adjudicate. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
Yep. And it does for me too, because I think I will mention, Kelly, that is an excellent explanation. And I
Thank you.
learned something after 13 years of doing this myself. But this is something that we get measured on by OPM every
Hmm.
year, the auto adjudication rate and so forth.
Hmm.
But I guess I will ask because I think members hear this, okay, things are programmed, it's never touched by a processor, right? So
Hmm.
if auto adjudication denies a claim, what happens? Does it get human review before it goes out, or
Hmm.
what are the next steps?
Well, generally, no. A human does not touch auto adjudicated claims because the goal of auto adjudication is so that we can pay and deny a claim without that human touch or intervention, right? But there are controls and processes in place behind the scenes that where the system knows when to pen a claim to a processor for an additional look or investigation. And let me give you an example. A good example are duplicate claims. If the system makes a direct match to a prior submitted claim, meaning all the information on that prior submitted claim and the new submitted claim are exactly the same, the system will auto deny it as a duplicate claim, right? No touch. We don't have to worry about it. However, there is other duplicate logic behind the scenes in the system where if a duplicate claim is received and it isn't a direct match, the system will stop the claim for additional review by the processor. And a good example of that is if the diagnosis submitted on the duplicate claim is not the same as the prior submitted claim, because what could happen is it could change the benefit that's due to the member. So it does require that claim to drop for a processor review and determine what needs to be done with that duplicate claim. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That does
I
make
could see that coming up on like an emergency room claim because we have different
Mm-hmm.
benefits for accidental injury versus medical
Correct.
emergency. Okay.
Correct. Right.
That makes a lot of sense. And we'll go ahead and move to another popular type of claim, the
Oh,
stateside massage claim, our favorite benefit for a lot of members. I'm using massage as an example for any type of claim that is perhaps paid by the member and then submitted to the plan for review and reimbursement. How do those
yeah.
claims work?
Yep, Maddie, you're right. It's a very, very popular benefit for our members. And I'll tell you that almost 1/3 of our paper claim inventory volume are massage therapy claims. Isn't
Wow.
that incredible?
Mhm.
For massage therapy in particular, it's really important that the claim include the provider's first and last name, their address, the provider's active massage therapy license number. We also need an itemization of the bill that includes the description of the services provided, the cost of each service, and then proof of payment of services. Oftentimes, members will submit cash register receipts as a bill, and unfortunately, we can't accept that because it's not a substitute for an itemized bill. We don't require diagnoses on massage therapy claims. However, I just want to mention that all other member submitted claims other than massage therapy, we always require a diagnosis.
Okay. So, and I think that's a key piece, and we've updated
Mhm.
the claim submission tool to help members give us that diagnosis and so forth where it's required. But assuming all of those elements are there, what happens next? Can we auto adjudicate those claims that we received, feed them through the system?
Yeah, unfortunately, no, because those types of claims are considered non-standard. They're not on a certain standardized form like we talked about earlier. So they must be manually keyed by the processor, and then they require review to ensure we pay them correctly or that they're handled correctly.
All right. So assuming that all the necessary elements are present, how quickly can a processor handle one of these claims?
Yeah. I mean, generally, every 7 minutes, the processor keys and finalizes a claim. Of course, the assumption is all of the information is present to actually enter and finalize the claim. It could take longer, for example, if the processor needs to stop and request the information that's needed.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, that blows my mind because sometimes just
Yeah.
reviewing and making sure everything's there can take me 7 minutes. So,
No, same. Yeah.
They're very experienced. Yes.
absolutely,
They know what they're
absolutely.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you said, we keep stressing, and in case our listeners aren't getting this, we really want to make sure that when you submit a claim, that all the pieces are there.
Hmm.
And Kelly ran through that. We've got information on our website. We'll put that out there again. But Kelly, what happens in the instance if something is missing? Maybe somebody doesn't have the license number or the tax ID number for their
Yeah.
massage therapist or provider.
Yep. Well, we do our best to do some investigation. Our processors have their little investigation hats on. But if they can't find the information and get the claim processed, it delays it, right? It delays the final processing of the claim and ultimately the benefit payment owed to the member. Um, there are, times when a member would submit a claim and there's multiple items missing that are needed to process a claim or actually get it into the system. Sometimes we
Mm.
don't have any information to even enter the claim. So in those cases, we would need to send a letter to the member to obtain the information. So the member would get a letter and it would list what we needed to process the claim. And then, of course, once we get the information, we'd be able to enter and process the claim. For claims that we can actually enter in the system, but maybe it's missing one piece of information, let's say a diagnosis, we talked about that, the processor would be able to notify the member by way of their explanation of benefit statement. So that statement would generate a note which would indicate what was needed in order to process the claim. So for example, it would say, we need a bill with the diagnosis and reason for treatment. When we get it, we'll consider this service. So if the member sees that, they would know what we needed to process the claim. So both the letter or the explanation of benefit statement will let the member know what's needed in order to finalize the claim. And then, of course, like I said, once we get it, we can complete the processing of the claim.
So
Gotcha.
good reminder there. When you get
Mhm.
that email notification or if you're getting mail statements, check your
Right,
EOB.
right.
I'm as bad as other people about not actually doing that, at least not on a regular basis, but do check that because maybe it wasn't processed. Maybe we
Hmm.
couldn't finalize it and pay it.
Hmm.
So do
Right,
check that.
right, exactly.
I have been letting those just collect in my inbox. So this is a great reminder for me to
I
actually
work
go
for
and
the
look for
company,
those.
Maddie, and I have to call my my customer service team
Right.
all the time.
Yep.
Yeah,
Good to
Yep.
know. Good to
yeah.
know. We'll go ahead and move to the last type of claim for this episode, which is the overseas claim. How many overseas claims did the plan receive in 2025?
Well, we processed and resolved a total of 526,000 overseas claims in 2025. Incredible, right? It's a big number, but that's just overseas claims. So the team does a really good job with those.
And the claims came from more than 100 countries,
Hmm.
Oh,
and
Right,
almost as many currencies and languages.
right.
Um, so Kelly, I mean, how does the team manage such diverse claims?
Well, we are fortunate. Um, we have a team that's fully dedicated to the Foreign Service Benefit Plan and they're experienced processors, right? Many of our processors have been working with us for 20 plus years, and that's about 30% of our staff. Some of the more complex work, we do specialize. We have certain processors that just handle those types of claims, and we do that to ensure the quality handling, and it's more efficient too. For example, we have a subset of certain providers that are just handling ASPA's direct bill arrangement provider claims. We have specializations for OFAC sanction claims, which have to be handled differently, and then claims that involve redirecting payment to the embassy or the State Department. So there are a few other examples, but we try not to specialize too much since we want all of our processors trained to handle all types of overseas claims to support our inventory needs.
all right. And many have been working on FSBP claims for decades that we
Hmm.
hired years ago.
Right,
That's
right.
so impressive.
And I just want to
Yeah,
stress with that you know
yeah.
we've been through some name changes, but the team has stayed steady. Some of you all have stayed steady from Mutual to Coventry to Aetna to CVS Health.
Yes.
I think that's
Hmm.
the name now. So,
Been there. Yep.
yep. So, but it is the same team that has
Yes,
remained dedicated to FSBP and to our members. So, and that's
absolutely.
incredible that that's 30% of the team.
Yes, it is. It
Amazing.
is incredible. Yep.
And super important just since we have such a unique audience. I think a lot of times people um underestimate like how complicated things can be when you're overseas. And it's incredible
Yeah.
that there's 30% of the staff that is helping just or that knows so much about
Yeah.
the audience and our
Absolutely.
members.
Yep. They do, and they know what they're doing. They
Mhm.
definitely do. Yep.
So, assuming that the team is not only expert, that I'm assuming that they aren't all fluent in six or seven foreign
Yeah.
languages and past careers as currency traders and things like that. So, given the range of languages,
Yeah.
currencies, and procedures, prescriptions, everything that comes in, because you all process the overseas prescriptions as well. How do you all approach the review? How do you actually manage all of this?
Well, for languages, we have some internal translation tools, that can assist them in reading the claim submission in the foreign language. This helps with turnaround time on finalizing the claim and then, of course, getting the payment to the member. German claims are probably a good example of that. They can use the tools for those. However, if the claim is more complex, it may require the use of our translation service to assist. Asian claims, as an example, we generally need to send those to the translation service before we enter the claim. And typically, their turnaround time is pretty good. It's usually 1 to 2 days, and then we get it back, and then it goes back to the processor, and then they can finalize the claim. For currencies, our system does convert foreign currency based on data service for most instances and then pulls the rates from the Rwanda currency converter. So it is a really nice tool in the system that the processors use for currencies. Um, Related to procedure, I'll just say, you know, if the if the member submitting the claims, as it's stated in section 7, for filing a claim, it does help us when we have all the information that we need to process the claim. And I know we've talked about that recently, but just for the member, providing as much clarifying information with the submitted claim. For example, providing the diagnosis, the symptom, or reason for the visit is extremely important because some of those overseas claim submissions from foreign providers do not include the diagnosis. So just, for the members to know that and to include that. Um, Also, I wanted to mention, Kyle, that there are certain procedures that we will conduct a medical necessity review of for
Sure.
overseas claims. Procedures they're listed in the brochure under Section 3, Other Services. But most we know that most overseas care does not require prior authorization, right? With the exception of infertility services, but the plan will conduct a review of those listed procedures when the claim is submitted to ensure medical necessity. And a good example of that is a blepharoplasty, which can be cosmetic in nature. So I just encourage your members to review that section for more information. And then, of course, they can always contact the ASPA team to confirm if medical necessity is needed. And if it does, the member can write to us and we'll pre-review it. Normally, it takes about 3 weeks from the receipt date for that review to be conducted. We have to review it. We have to send it off to our nurses and physicians to review it. It comes back, and then the processor can handle it.
Right.
Yep.
Good to know.
Yep.
And obviously, with non-standard and overseas
Yep.
claims, there can be room for error. How do you guys account for that?
Yep. Well, we're constantly discussing error trends. In fact, I think I have something on my calendar today. We're always talking about quality. That's what we do. We process claims and we have to make sure the quality of it is good. So we talk about error trends with the individual processors and the teams as a whole on a regular basis. And we're always looking at our policy and procedures regularly and discussing that in the team huddles. We're fortunate to have 7 quality consultants in the claim team, and they work behind the scenes to review all the quality errors, ensure all of our processor policies are up to date. They question some of them, they bring them to their lead, their supervisor, to myself. We talk about them, if there's any retraining that's needed. The also fun thing that we do, the processors might not think it's fun, but we do weekly quality quizzes to ensure, we test their knowledge basically. But, the processor's main quality metric is their percentage of claims reworked against their average claim volume process. So in other words, if a claim has to be reworked because of an error in their original claim processing, the processor is charged an error and they're held to that. Our rework error percent that was correct last year for the combined team was 99.75%, and the internal goal is 99.3%. So great job to the team. And then our internal audit quality for 2025 exceeded the goal as well. The pay accuracy result was 99.79%, and the goal is 99%. And then the processing accuracy result was 98.8%, and the goal is 95. So I'm really proud of the team for all of the work they do behind the scenes that go into these results. I mean, we're not perfect, but we do really strive to perfection and work through all those things that we need to fix, right? But one last thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Outside of those formal quality programs, we also do review claims routinely, right? We dig in, we review claims routinely. We have an audit team that reviews high dollar claims. If an error is found, we track it, we trend it, and then we collaborate. Me and the leaders and the quality consultants, we collaborate on any corrective actions that are needed, document those, and of course, provide processor feedback to the individual or the teams. And then all of that is incorporated in their yearly performance review.
Kelly, I just want to say these results, we review them on the AFSPA side on a regular basis. We get great reports from you and your team. I am always blown away at the fantastic work that the team does, and so
Yeah,
grateful
they do.
because we talk a lot about the uniqueness of our membership, but it really shows up when you're
hmm
working with the claims,
hmm
and could
hmm
be dealing with a dozen different languages in a single day, and
Right.
to exceed, 99% almost on all
Yeah.
those is amazing. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to note that Kelly and her team have made some recommendations. We've worked closely with them to try to make improvements over the last
hmm
year and a half to our claim submission tool in the
hmm
AFSPA member portal. So trying to make
Yeah.
it easier for members to get their information to us so that
hmm
we don't have as many stops for missing information. So
Right.
there are separate spaces to note the diagnosis, the reason for the visit, what services you received, and more. So check if you haven't submitted a claim in a while, they're sitting on your desk or sitting in the file somewhere. Put them in. It's a fairly straightforward process, and then we can get you some
hmm
money back.
Yep.
So, Kelly, before we wrap up, do you have any advice for our members on submitting their claims?
Yep. I would just say, make sure they're thorough in filling out the forms on the ASPA site in the portal. If it asks a question, fill it out. Make sure you have all the information there. I think the biggest pain point for us has been not getting a diagnosis on
Hmm.
the member claim submissions. And it's kind of painful, because I know the processors don't want to delay payment of the claim, but we do require a diagnosis, in order to finalize the benefit payment.
Yeah.
However, you mentioned the recent portal updates, and I'm really excited about those because we did partner with your team. They've been very receptive to us about input. They've asked us for input. And those changes to me are very exciting. That standard form in the tool is now asking specific information related to a diagnosis so it basically requires the member to choose a diagnosis in the drop down or write it in if it's not there. So I encourage members to write their diagnosis or their symptom related to their doctor visit for the claims that they're submitting. And then with those recent updates, though, Kyle, I looped back with my team before we had this podcast, and we're seeing very positive results with
Yeah.
that recent change. It's really minimized the need for the team to actually stop and request a diagnosis from the member and delay the claim payment. So that's exciting to me. And then related to massage therapy, there are specific reminders on the submission form related to what we talked about earlier, the provider's full name, their address, their licensure, and just reminding them of proof of payment. Proof of payment is important. So, before we issue the payment to the member. And then I guess I'll just say lastly, I would ask the members to use the AFSPA member portal if they're not. You said that, because the tool does help them and us. It prompts them for certain information on the forms that we need to process their claim. And then it's also important too, if the member chooses the correct option in the portal, because sometimes if they have a massage therapy claim, they're using the standard medical submission form or vice versa. So just make sure that if the member's in the portal, that they're, choosing massage therapy if it's massage therapy, their wellness incentive, there's a form for that, or the standard medical claim submission form.
This has been incredible tips,
Yeah.
especially for submitting claims. So I hope our members are listening. But before we go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think we've pretty much covered most of it, Maddie. But thank you, Kyle and Maddie. I truly appreciate and being here today. It's been a pleasure. Like I said earlier, I am truly blessed and that I've been part of this family for all of these years and love working with the AFSPA team. So just thank you again for having me here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for being such a big part of making FSBP what it is today. Thanks, Kelly.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Kelly Rath for joining us, and a million thanks to her and her team for all they do for FSBP every day. For more information on FSBP claims submissions, please visit afspa.org/FSBP/claims or click the link in our show notes. This has been AFSPA Talks, a production of the American Foreign Service Protective Association. All information offered in this podcast is meant to be educational. The views expressed by the hosts and guests do not necessarily represent AFSPA. Should there be any discrepancy between information offered in this podcast and official plan documents for the Foreign Service Benefit Plan or other products offered by AFSPA and its partners, the policy provisions will prevail. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to AFSPA Talks on your favorite podcast app to catch all of our future episodes. Please rate and review us on your favorite app and stay up to date on all things AFSPA on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Look for @AFSPA Cares. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of AFSPA Talks. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss an episode. If you have any follow-up questions about the topics in this episode, join our AFSPA Live Q&A session on the last Thursday of every month. We will be streaming live at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/AFSPA Cares. Thanks for listening.